Anthony Miller was known throughout the city for his piano playing. Everyone said he had golden fingers. That's what his old teacher called them when he was just 8 years old. Now at 36, Anthony had won so many awards that he kept them in a special glass cabinet in his living room. Sometimes, when he felt a bit down, he would stand in front of that cabinet and remember all the times people had clapped for him. Anthony taught piano at Westfield Music School, the best music school in town. The building was old and made of red brick, with tall windows that let in streams of light during afternoon lessons. His classroom was on the 3rd floor, with a view of the park and 2 grand pianos, one for him and one for his students. He only taught the advanced students, the ones who had already shown they had talent. The beginners went to other teachers. "Your left hand needs to be lighter here," Anthony would say, tapping on the sheet music with his pencil, like you're touching a bubble without popping it. His students both feared and admired him. He could hear mistakes that no one else noticed. If someone played a note even slightly too loud or too soft, his head would tilt to the side and his eyebrows would pull together. The students called this his disappointed face, and they all tried their best to avoid seeing it. On Tuesday evenings, the teachers at Westfield would gather in the staff room for coffee and cookies. They would talk about their students' upcoming concerts and new music they had discovered. These meetings were supposed to be friendly chats where everyone could share ideas, but they often turned into what some teachers secretly called the Anthony Show. Bach never intended for that piece to be played so slowly, Anthony said one evening, waving his cookie in the air as he spoke. "It completely loses its character when you drag it out like that." He was talking to Diane, who taught the intermediate students. She'd been explaining how she helped a nervous 12-year-old play more confidently by slowing down a difficult Bach piece. "Well, it worked for Tyler," Diane said, her voice getting quiet. "He finally stopped freezing up during the middle section." "That's because you made it too easy," Anthony replied with a little laugh. "The whole point of that piece is the challenge." The room went silent. Robert, who taught music theory, quickly changed the subject to the upcoming spring recital. Anthony didn't notice how Diane's face had fallen or how she slipped out of the room a few minutes later. This was typical of Anthony. He wasn't trying to be unkind, at least he didn't think of himself as unkind. In his mind, he was simply right about music. He had studied with famous teachers, performed in famous concert halls, and received standing ovations from hundreds of people. If others couldn't handle honest feedback, that wasn't his problem. His apartment reflected his view of himself. It was on the top floor of a building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek modern furniture. The centerpiece was his piano, a handmade concert grand that cost more than most cars. He practiced on it for at least 3 hours every day, even after teaching for hours at the school. On the rare evenings when he wasn't practicing or teaching, Anthony would sometimes go to concerts at the city's music hall. He never went just to enjoy the music. He went to analyze, to compare, to judge. As he listened, he would mentally note every mistake, every interpretation he disagreed with. The tempo was all wrong in the second movement, he would tell anyone who asked for his opinion afterward. "And did you hear that fumble in the cadenza?" Amateur mistake. People had stopped inviting him to post-concert dinners. There was one person who still enjoyed Anthony's company, his mother, Clara. Every Sunday, he would visit her small house in the suburbs and play her favorite songs on her out-of-tune upright piano. She would sit in her armchair, eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music. "You play so beautifully," she would say afterward, "just like your father did." Anthony's father had been a pianist too, though not a professional one. He had died when Anthony was 15, but before that he had encouraged his son's talent without pushing too hard. It was after his death that Anthony had become obsessed with being the best. Clara was the only person Anthony never corrected or criticized. When she said she loved Chopin's Raindrop Prelude because it reminded her of spring showers, he didn't lecture her about Chopin's actual inspiration for the piece. He just played it for her again. The spring recital at Westfield was always a big event. Students from all levels performed, and many went on to compete in regional competitions afterward. As the teacher of the advanced students, Anthony's group always performed last, the grand finale of the evening. This year, his star pupil was a 17-year-old named Lee, who had already been accepted to 3 prestigious music conservatories. Lai was playing Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically challenging pieces in piano literature. Anthony had been working with him on it for months. The night before the recital, Anthony stayed late at school to practice his own piece. He always performed after his students, showing them how it should be done. The school was quiet, most of the lights turned off. He sat at the piano in the recital hall, losing himself in Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice the cleaning woman who had paused in the doorway, mop in hand, listening. Only when he finished the first movement and looked up did he see her standing there. "Sorry," she said quickly, already backing away. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine," Anthony said, closing his sheet music. "I was finished anyway." The woman was middle-aged with dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. She wore the blue uniform of the cleaning staff and she looked tired after a long day of work. "That was very beautiful," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Rachmaninoff, yes?" Anthony was surprised. The cleaning staff didn't usually know classical composers. "Yes, his third concerto," he replied, studying her more carefully now. "Are you familiar with classical music?" She smiled slightly. "A little. I enjoy listening when I can." Something about her calm confidence bothered Anthony. In his experience, people who weren't professional musicians should be more impressed when they heard him play. They should be amazed, stunned, overwhelmed, not just quietly appreciative. "Do you play?" he asked, though he was certain she didn't. How could she? She was cleaning floors for a living. "Sometimes," she answered. "When I have the chance." Anthony almost laughed. He pictured her plunking out chopsticks or heart and soul on some cheap keyboard. "You should come to the recital tomorrow," he said, gathering his things. "My students are quite talented and I'll be performing as well." "Thank you," she said. "Perhaps I will." As she turned to go, Anthony felt a strange impulse. Perhaps it was her unimpressed manner, or maybe it was just his need to always be the best in any room. "We should play together sometime," he said, his voice casual but with an edge of challenge. "I'm always interested in different approaches to music." The woman paused, looking back at him. For a moment something flickered in her eyes. Amusement? Assessment? She simply nodded and said, "That might be interesting," before continuing down the hall with her mop. That night, Anthony couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. Why had he challenged a cleaning woman to play piano with him? It was ridiculous. She probably barely knew how to read music. Yet something about her had gotten under his skin. Her calm, her lack of proper awe at his playing. The next day, as his students prepared for the recital, he mentioned the strange encounter to Lee. "So I basically challenged the cleaning lady to a piano duel," he said with a laugh as Lee arranged his sheet music. "The new one? With the quiet voice?" Lee asked. "She started a few weeks ago, I think." "Yes, that's the one. She seemed to think she knows something about Rachmaninoff." Lee looked uncomfortable. "Maybe she does. You never know about people." "I suppose we'll find out if she shows up tonight," Anthony said dismissively. "Now remember to take that middle section a bit faster than we practiced yesterday. It needs to sparkle." The recital hall filled up that evening with parents, friends, and music lovers from around the city. Anthony stood backstage watching his students perform one by one. Lee played brilliantly, his fingers flying over the keys during the most difficult passages of La Campanella. As Anthony prepared to go on stage for the final performance of the night, he scanned the audience. To his surprise, he spotted the cleaning woman sitting in the back row. She wasn't in her uniform now, but wore a simple blue dress. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave a small nod of recognition. Anthony walked to the piano with confidence, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. Then he began to play the Rachmaninoff concerto, the same piece the woman had heard him practicing. He played flawlessly, his technique perfect, his interpretation exactly as he believed the composer intended. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. He stood and bowed, accepting their admiration as his due. As people began to leave, talking excitedly about the performances, Anthony noticed the cleaning woman still sitting in her seat, watching him thoughtfully. He made his way through the crowd toward her, curious about what she would say. Would she finally show proper appreciation for his skill? Would she realize how foolish the idea of them playing together was? But before he could reach her, the dean of the school stopped him to introduce him to a potential donor. By the time he was free again, the woman was gone. "Did you see where the woman in the blue dress went?" he asked Lee, who was packing up his sheet music. "The one from last night?" "I think she left already," Lee said. But people are talking about her. Talking about her? Why? Because someone recognized her, Lee said, his voice suddenly excited. Mr. Miller, do you know who she is? The morning after the recital, Anthony woke up later than usual. He had stayed at the after-party until midnight, accepting compliments and discussing music theory with the school's biggest donors. His head hurt a little from the champagne, but he smiled, remembering how everyone had crowded around him. He made coffee and sat by his living room window, looking out at the city below. The spring sunshine made everything look bright and new. As he sipped from his mug, his thoughts drifted back to the cleaning woman in the blue dress. What had Lee meant about people recognizing her? Anthony pulled out his phone and called his student. Good morning, Mr. Miller, Lee answered, sounding like he'd been awake for hours. Lee, what were you saying last night about the cleaning woman? Who did people think she was? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I'm not completely sure, Lee said finally. Some of the older teachers were whispering about her. I think Professor Chen called her the ghost of Beijing Concert Hall or something like that. Anthony frowned. What does that mean? I don't know exactly. My mom might know. She follows classical music from China. Want me to ask her? Yes, please do, Anthony said, his curiosity growing. And let me know what you find out. After hanging up, Anthony tried searching online for Ghost of Beijing Concert Hall, but found nothing helpful. He showered and dressed, still puzzling over the mystery woman. He had piano lessons to teach that afternoon, but first he decided to stop by the school to see if he could learn anything more. The school hallways were quiet on a Saturday morning. A few weekend lessons were happening in distant practice rooms, the faint sound of scales and simple pieces echoing through the building. Anthony headed toward the administration office, hoping to find Rita, the secretary who knew everything about everyone. Rita was at her desk, typing away at her computer. Her glasses hung from a chain around her neck, and her gray hair was pinned up in its usual bun. Good morning, Anthony, she said without looking up. Wonderful performance last night. Thank you, Rita, he replied, leaning against her desk. I was wondering about the new cleaning staff. Now Rita did look up, her eyebrows raised. The cleaning staff? That's not usually your area of interest. Anthony tried to sound casual. I met one of them yesterday. An Asian woman, middle-aged. Seemed to know something about classical music. Rita's expression changed. Ah, you mean Ms. Zhou Meizhou? Yes, that's probably her. What do you know about her? Rita took off her glasses and studied Anthony's face. Why are you asking? Just curious. Lee said some people recognized her at the recital. Rita nodded slowly. I'm not surprised. When she applied for the job, I thought her name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then Professor Chen saw her and nearly fell over from shock. But who is she? Anthony pressed. I'm not entirely sure, Rita admitted. Professor Chen wouldn't say much, just that she used to be someone important in the classical music world in China. Then she disappeared from public view about 15 years ago. Anthony's interest was now fully piqued. Do you have her contact information? For the staff directory, I mean. Rita gave him a knowing look but wrote something on a sticky note. Here's her email. That's all I have. And Anthony, she added as he took the note. Whatever happened in her past, she clearly chose to leave it behind. Maybe respect that. Anthony nodded, but his mind was already racing. He thanked Rita and left, pulling out his phone as soon as he was in the hallway. He sent an email to Ms. Zhou, keeping it simple. I enjoyed our brief conversation at the recital hall. My offer to play together still stands. Let me know if you're interested. He didn't really expect a reply, so he was surprised when his phone pinged with a response just minutes later. Thank you for your kind offer. I would enjoy that. I am free tomorrow afternoon at 3 if that works for you. Anthony stared at his phone. She had actually accepted his challenge. He quickly replied, confirming the time and suggesting they meet at the school's smallest recital room, which would be empty on a Sunday. That night, Lai called him with information from his mother. Mr. Miller, my mom nearly screamed when I mentioned the name Meizhou. She says 15 years ago, Meizhou was one of China's most celebrated pianists. She won international competitions and played with orchestras all over the world. Anthony sat up straighter. Really? Then why is she cleaning floors at our school? That's the strange part, Lee continued. At the height of her fame, she suddenly canceled all her concerts and disappeared from public view. There were all kinds of rumors, health problems, family tragedy, political issues. Nobody knows for sure. My mom says people called her the ghost because she vanished so completely. After thanking Lee, Anthony spent hours online, searching for information about Mei-Jo. He found old concert programs from major venues around the world, a few grainy photos from newspapers, and reviews praising her transcendent technique and profound emotional depth. But everything stopped abruptly 15 years ago, as if she had simply ceased to exist. Anthony barely slept that night. He kept thinking about how he had spoken to this woman, this once renowned concert pianist, as if she were just a novice. Had she been laughing at him inside? Or was she truly as humble as she seemed? The next day, Anthony arrived at the recital room 30 minutes early. He practiced some of his most impressive pieces, warming up his fingers and settling his nerves. Why was he nervous? This was ridiculous. Even if she had been good once, 15 years away from performing would have dulled her skills. Besides, he was Anthony Miller, the star of Westfield Music School. At exactly 3 o'clock, there was a soft knock on the door. Mei-Jo entered wearing simple black pants and a blue blouse. Her hair was in the same neat bun and she carried no sheet music. "Thank you for inviting me," she said, bowing slightly. Anthony nodded, suddenly unsure what to say. I did some research after we met. You had quite a career." A small smile appeared on her face. "That was a long time ago. Another life. Why did you stop performing?" Anthony asked directly. May's expression grew distant. "Some paths change unexpectedly," she said quietly. "But we are here to play, yes?" Anthony gestured toward the piano. "Ladies first." She sat down at the bench, adjusting its height. For a moment she closed her eyes, her hands hovering above the keys. Then she began to play. The piece was familiar to Anthony, Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. It was a demanding piece, full of emotional contrasts and technical challenges. But as May played, Anthony forgot about analyzing her technique or judging her interpretation. For the first time in years, he simply listened. Her playing was unlike anything he had heard before. The notes seemed to flow from her fingers as naturally as breathing. The quiet passages were intimate, like secrets being whispered, and the thundering climaxes shook the room. Anthony found himself holding his breath during the final frenzied coda. When she finished, neither of them spoke for a long moment. The last notes hung in the air between them. "That was, Anthony began, then stopped, unable to find adequate words. May stood up from the bench. "Your turn," she said simply. Anthony moved to the piano in a daze. What could he possibly play after that? He had prepared Liszt's Transcendental Etude No. 10, a piece chosen to showcase his technical brilliance. Now it seemed like showing off. Still, he had to play something. He sat down and began the etude, his fingers flying across the keys in the rapid passages. He played perfectly, not missing a single note, maintaining the furious tempo throughout. When he finished, he looked up at May, seeking her reaction. She nodded appreciatively. "Very impressive technique," she said. "You have worked hard." Somehow her compliment felt hollow. Anthony realized she had given him the kind of praise he often gave to talented students, acknowledging their skill while noting what was missing. "But?" he prompted. May tilted her head slightly. "But what?" "There's something else. Something you think I'm missing." She considered him for a moment before speaking. "May I ask why you play piano, Mr. Miller?" The question caught him off guard. "Because I'm good at it," he said automatically. "Because I've always played." "Those are reasons to start playing," she said gently. "Not reasons to continue for a lifetime." Anthony felt defensive. "I play because music is important." "Because it's art," May nodded. "Yes, it is art, and what does art do?" "It expresses beauty, technical mastery, the composer's intentions, yes, and more," she said. "It connects people. It speaks what cannot be said in words. When you played just now, I heard perfect notes, but I did not hear you." Anthony wanted to argue, to defend his playing, but something stopped him. Instead, he asked, "Would you play something else?" May sat down at the piano again. This time, she played something Anthony didn't recognize, a piece that seemed to combine classical Western techniques with Chinese melodic elements. It was hauntingly beautiful, moving from delicate, rippling passages to powerful chords and back again. As she played, Anthony saw tears on her cheeks, though her expression remained serene. When the last note faded, she wiped her face quickly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I haven't played that piece in many years. It was the last one I composed before. You composed too? Anthony asked, amazed. I used to, she said, standing up. Thank you for this afternoon, Mr. Miller. It was good to play again on such a fine instrument. Wait, Anthony said as she turned to leave. Will you tell me why you stopped performing? What happened 15 years ago? May paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Perhaps another time, she said softly. But I will tell you this, every path has its purpose. I am not unhappy cleaning your school, Mr. Miller. There is value in simple work and being invisible sometimes. After she left, Anthony sat alone in the recital room for a long time. He felt shaken, as if something fundamental had shifted inside him. He had wanted to impress this woman, to show her his superiority. Instead, she had shown him how much he still had to learn. The next day at school, he looked for May but didn't see her. When he asked Rita about her schedule, the secretary gave him a curious look. She's not here today, Rita said. Actually, she left a note for you. Rita handed him an envelope. Inside was a simple note card with neat handwriting. Thank you for the music yesterday. If you are still interested, I would be willing to play with you again. Perhaps we could arrange something for the spring charity concert? May Jo? Anthony read the note twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He had a lot to think about. For 3 days, Anthony thought about May's note. The idea of playing alongside her at the charity concert made him both excited and nervous. He hadn't felt nervous about performing since he was a teenager. What would they play? How would the audience react? Would people compare them? These questions kept him awake at night. On Wednesday morning, he finally wrote back to her. I would be honored to perform with you at the charity concert. Perhaps we could meet to discuss the program? They arranged to meet that weekend at a small coffee shop downtown, away from the school. Anthony arrived early and chose a quiet table in the corner. When May walked in, he was struck again by her simple elegance. She wore a dark green sweater and black pants, her hair in its usual neat bun. Nothing about her appearance suggested she had once played in the great concert halls of the world. Thank you for accepting my suggestion, she said, as she sat down across from him. I hope I'm not imposing on your usual program. Not at all, Anthony replied, pushing a cup of tea toward her. I ordered for you. Green tea, no sugar. I hope that's okay. She looked surprised, but nodded. Perfect, thank you. They spent the next hour discussing music. Anthony was impressed by May's knowledge of the repertoire and her thoughtful ideas about which pieces might work well for the charity concert. The theme of the concert is New Beginnings, Anthony explained. It's to raise money for the school's scholarship program. May nodded. Then perhaps we should choose pieces that reflect transformation or renewal. They decided on a program. May would play Debussy's Clair de Lune, Anthony would perform Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, and together they would play Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2 for 2 pianos. The Rachmaninoff is challenging, Anthony said. We'll need to practice together several times. Yes, May agreed. It requires perfect communication between pianists. As they gathered their things to leave, Anthony hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind. Will you tell me now? About why you left your career? May looked down at her empty teacup. For a moment, Anthony thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke quietly. My daughter was very sick. A rare blood disease. We tried everything, all the treatments available in China. Nothing worked. She took a deep breath before continuing. There was a specialist in America who was doing experimental treatments. I canceled all my concerts and brought her here. For 2 years, we lived in hospitals. The treatments were expensive. I sold everything, used all my savings. Did she? Anthony couldn't finish the question. She lived, May said, a small smile appearing. She is in college now studying medicine. She wants to help other children with the same disease. But why didn't you return to performing after she recovered? May shrugged slightly. Life changes us. After spending so much time in hospitals watching my daughter fight for her life, playing concerts seemed less important. And there were practical reasons, too. I had been away too long. No manager, no connections, and my visa situation was complicated. So I stayed, took whatever jobs I could find, made a simple life. Don't you miss it? Anthony asked. The stage, the applause? Sometimes, she admitted. But I found other joys. Teaching piano to neighborhood children. Playing for nursing homes. Music doesn't need grand halls to be meaningful. Anthony was silent, trying to imagine giving up everything he had worked for. He couldn't picture it. We should start practicing next week, May said, changing the subject. The concert is only a month away. News that Anthony Miller would be performing with the mysterious May Jo spread quickly through the school. Students and teachers alike were buzzing with excitement and curiosity. Is it true she was famous in China? Why is she working as a cleaner? Are they really going to play Rachmaninoff together? Anthony found himself at the center of attention, but for once he didn't enjoy it. The questions made him uncomfortable, especially when people asked about May's past. She's an excellent pianist, was all he would say. You'll hear for yourself at the concert. Their first practice session was awkward. They met in the same small recital room where they had played for each other. Anthony felt strangely self-conscious as they began working on the Rachmaninoff piece. I usually take the first piano part, he said, sitting down at one of the grand pianos. Of course, May replied, taking her place at the second piano. They began to play, but it wasn't going well. Anthony kept pushing the tempo while May tried to add more expressive pauses. After 20 minutes of stopping and starting, they were both frustrated. Perhaps we need to discuss our interpretation before playing, May suggested gently. My interpretation is correct, Anthony said sharply. Rachmaninoff's own recordings show similar tempos. Music isn't just about being correct, May replied. It's about communication between the pianists and with the audience. That's just an excuse people use when they can't master the technical elements, Anthony shot back. As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted them. May's face showed no anger, only a deep sadness that made Anthony feel ashamed. I'm sorry, he said quickly. That was uncalled for. You're right, we should talk about our interpretation. May nodded, but the rest of their practice was tense. They managed to play through the first movement, but neither of them felt good about it. As they were packing up, May spoke quietly. Music is not a competition, Mr. Miller. Not between us, anyway. We are playing together, not against each other. Her words stayed with Anthony long after she had left. That night he pulled out recordings of Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2 and listened to several different interpretations. He had to admit there were many valid approaches to the piece, not just his own. Their next practice went better. Anthony made an effort to listen more and direct less. Slowly they found a rhythm together, a way of communicating through the music. By their fourth session, something magical was happening. They were breathing together, feeling the music in the same way, anticipating each other's subtle shifts in tempo and dynamics. That was beautiful, Anthony said after they finished a complete run-through. I've never played with anyone like this before, May smiled. It's like dancing with someone who knows exactly where you're going to step next. As the concert approached, word spread beyond the school. A local newspaper ran a small story about the renowned Chinese pianist making a surprise return to the stage. Former fans and colleagues of May's began calling the school, asking about tickets. The charity concert, usually attended mainly by parents and school supporters, was suddenly the hottest ticket in town. The school's dean called Anthony to his office 2 weeks before the concert. This is getting bigger than we anticipated, he said, showing Anthony the ticket sales figures. We've moved it to the main concert hall downtown, and we're still sold out. There's even a waiting list. Anthony nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. It's all because of May Jo. Yes, and we're grateful she agreed to perform. But Anthony, the dean leaned forward. This is also a huge opportunity for you. Critics from major publications will be there. This could take your career to the next level. The idea should have thrilled Anthony. This was what he had always wanted. Recognition, acclaim, a chance to shine on a bigger stage. But instead he felt a strange emptiness. It's May they're coming to see, not me, he said. The dean shook his head. They're coming to see both of you. Don't sell yourself short. You're one of the finest pianists I know. But as Anthony left the office, he wondered if that was really true. Was he truly one of the finest? Or had he just been a big fish in a small pond all these years? He found May in their usual practice room already warming up. The concert has been moved, he told her. Main concert hall downtown. It's sold out. May's hand stilled on the keys. So many people, she said softly. Are you nervous? Anthony asked, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. It has been a very long time since I played for a large audience, she admitted. What if they are disappointed? I am not the same pianist I was 15 years ago. No, Anthony agreed. From what I can tell, you're better. May looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. Then she laughed, a real, uninhibited laugh that transformed her face. "You have changed, Mr. Miller." "Call me Anthony, please," he said, sitting down at the second piano. "And yes, I think I have changed. You've taught me something important." "What is that?" Anthony thought for a moment. "That being right about music isn't the same as making music right." May nodded, her expression warm. "Shall we practice? We have a big concert to prepare for." As they began to play, Anthony felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of making music not to impress anyone, but simply because it was beautiful. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't thinking about being the best. He was thinking about being part of something greater than himself. The charity concert was now just days away. Anthony and May were as ready as they could be. Their playing had reached a level of harmony that astonished everyone who heard them practice. But there was a whisper of anxiety in the air too, a sense that something unexpected was about to happen. The night before the big concert, Anthony couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed, his mind racing through the pieces they would play, imagining every possible mistake or mishap. Around midnight, he gave up trying to sleep and went to his piano. He didn't turn on the lights, playing softly by the glow of the city through his windows. He played through his part of the Rachmaninoff, but something felt off. Without May's piano answering his, the music seemed incomplete. Anthony realized how much he had come to rely on their musical conversation, the way her playing complemented and enhanced his own. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from May. "Are you awake too?" Anthony smiled and called her. "How did you know?" "Concert nerves," May replied. "They're the same for everyone." "I haven't had them in years. Are you worried?" Anthony asked. There was a pause before she answered. "Not about the playing, but about being seen again, being recognized. I've been invisible for so long. Do you regret agreeing to do this?" "No," she said firmly. "It's time. My daughter will be there tomorrow. She's never heard me play on a proper stage before." Anthony was surprised. "She's coming. You never mentioned that. She's flying in from Boston. It was going to be a surprise, but—" May's voice softened. "I needed to tell someone how much it means to me." They talked for another hour, not about music or the concert, but about their lives. May's daughter Lily and her medical studies, Anthony's childhood and his father's love of piano, their favorite books and films, the places they had traveled. When they finally said goodnight, Anthony felt calm for the first time in days. Whatever happened at the concert, he had gained something precious, a true friend and musical partner. The next day dawned bright and clear. Anthony arrived at the concert hall early for their final rehearsal. The grand space, with its perfect acoustics and rows of empty seats, felt both exciting and intimidating. Two magnificent concert grand pianos waited on stage, positioned so the pianists could see each other as they played. May arrived looking elegant in a simple black dress, her hair styled in a more formal version of her usual bun. Together, they ran through parts of each piece, more to feel comfortable in the space than to practice the music itself. "It feels good here," May said as they finished. "The sound is warm," Anthony nodded. "Are you ready for tonight?" He took a deep breath. "Yes, are you?" "I think so," he said, though his stomach fluttered with nerves. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you. After this is over, would you consider teaching at Westfield? The students could learn so much from you." May looked surprised. "You would want me as a colleague? Not as the cleaning staff?" Anthony felt ashamed. "I was arrogant and blind. You're one of the finest musicians I've ever met. The school would be lucky to have you." "Thank you," she said softly. "I will think about it." Hours later, Anthony peeked through the curtain at the audience filing into the concert hall. The place was packed. He spotted music critics he recognized, prominent musicians, wealthy donors, and even a few celebrities. In the front row was a young Asian woman who looked like a younger version of May. Her daughter Lily, he guessed. Backstage, the dean was practically dancing with excitement. "This is the biggest event we've ever had. The scholarship fund will benefit enormously." Anthony nodded, only half listening as he mentally prepared himself. May stood quietly nearby, her eyes closed, her breathing steady and controlled. The program was arranged so that Anthony would play first, then May, and finally they would perform together. As the lights dimmed and the dean went on stage to make introductions, Anthony felt a hand squeeze his briefly. "Play with your heart tonight," May whispered. Not just your hands. Then it was time. Anthony walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. He bowed, sat at the piano, and took a moment to center himself. Then he began Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata. From the first powerful chords, Anthony knew something was different about his playing tonight. He wasn't thinking about impressing the audience or demonstrating his technical skill. He was simply telling a story through Beethoven's music, a story of struggle and beauty and resilience. When he finished, the applause was warm and appreciative. Anthony took his bow and then gestured toward the side of the stage. It is my great honor to introduce a truly remarkable pianist, making her return to the concert stage after 15 years. Please welcome May Jo. The audience erupted in applause as May walked onto the stage. She bowed deeply, her face composed but her eyes shining with emotion. As the clapping continued, Anthony saw her glance at her daughter in the front row. The young woman was crying, clapping harder than anyone. When the hall finally quieted, May sat at the piano. She paused, her hands hovering above the keys, and then began Debussy's Clair de Lune. Anthony, watching from the side of the stage, felt his breath catch. May's playing was transcendent. The familiar piece, often played by intermediate students, became something otherworldly in her hands. The delicate notes seemed to float in the air, creating a moonlit landscape of sound. The audience was completely silent, mesmerized. When the final gentle chord faded away, there was a moment of absolute stillness before the crowd burst into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. May looked overwhelmed, bowing several times, her eyes bright with unshed tears. As the applause continued, she gestured to Anthony to join her on stage. They took their places at the two pianos for Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2. Anthony caught May's eye, and she gave him a small nod. They began to play, and immediately Anthony felt that magical connection they had developed during their practices. But tonight it was even stronger, more intuitive. They breathed together, felt the music together, anticipated each other's subtle shifts in tempo and expression perfectly. The piece was demanding, requiring both technical brilliance and deep emotional understanding. As they played the achingly beautiful third movement, Anthony found himself moved nearly to tears by the conversation between their two pianos. Sometimes one voice leading, sometimes the other, but always in perfect harmony. By the time they reached the final movement, with its driving rhythm and triumphant melody, the energy between them was electric. They pushed each other to greater heights, taking risks that paid off magnificently. When they struck the final chords together, the sound rang through the concert hall like a victory bell. The audience exploded in applause. People were standing, cheering, some even calling bravo. Anthony and May stood and bowed together, then to each other. The applause continued as they left the stage, only to be called back for 3 curtain calls. Backstage, they were immediately surrounded by well-wishers. The dean, teachers from the school, critics wanting interviews, old colleagues of May's who had come to witness her return. That was extraordinary, the dean kept saying, shaking both their hands repeatedly. Simply extraordinary. A famous music critic cornered Anthony. Your playing has transformed, Miller. There was always technical brilliance, but tonight there was soul. What changed? Anthony looked across the crowded room to where May stood with her daughter, their hands clasped tightly together. I found a better teacher, he said simply. Later, when the crowd had thinned, Anthony found May sitting alone on a bench in the hallway, looking tired but content. Your daughter seems wonderful, he said, sitting beside her. She is, May smiled. She wants me to play more concerts, maybe even record again. Will you? May looked thoughtful. Perhaps. But I'm not the same person I was before. I don't want the life I had, the constant travel, the pressure, the loneliness. I want to play music that matters with people who matter. She looked at Anthony. People like you? Anthony felt a warmth spread through his chest. I was thinking, he said, we could start a chamber music series at the school. Something intimate, meaningful. And if you decide to teach, we could mentor students together. I would like that, May said. Very much. Outside the concert hall, fans and photographers waited, hoping for a glimpse of the pianist who had disappeared for 15 years only to return in such spectacular fashion. But May and Anthony slipped out a side door, walking together through the quiet streets of the city. Are you happy with how it went? Anthony asked. May nodded, looking up at the stars. Yes. For the first time in many years, I remembered why I fell in love with the piano as a child. Not for the applause or the fame, but for the joy of making something beautiful. Anthony understood exactly what she meant. Tonight he too had remembered the pure joy of music, something he had nearly lost in his pursuit of perfection and acclaim. Thank you, he said quietly. For teaching me to hear music again, not just play it, May smiled. We taught each other, I think. They continued walking, talking about the concert, planning for the future. Two musicians who had found in each other not a rival, but a companion on the journey. 1 year had passed since the charity concert that changed everything. Anthony stood in his classroom at Westfield Music School, watching his students file in for their weekly masterclass. The room looked different now. He had replaced the rows of chairs with a circle, encouraging the students to learn from each other, not just from him. As the last student settled in, Anthony smiled at them. Today we have a special guest joining us, someone I think you all know. The door opened and May walked in, carrying a folder of sheet music. The students straightened in their chairs. In the past year, May had become something of a legend at the school. Good afternoon, she said, her voice gentle but commanding. Thank you for having me today. It still amazed Anthony how much had changed. After their concert, things had happened quickly. A recording of their performance, posted online by an audience member, had gone viral in classical music circles. Critics wrote glowing reviews, calling their partnership a perfect musical conversation and a remarkable blend of Eastern and Western sensibilities. The school had immediately offered May a position teaching advanced piano. She had accepted on one condition, that she could continue her custodial job part-time. When the dean had asked why, she explained simply, "It keeps me humble, and there is honor in all work." Anthony had been humbled by her response, remembering his initial dismissal of her because of her job. Today we're discussing interpretation, Anthony told the class, how we find our own voice within the composer's instructions, and how we listen to each other when playing together, May added, catching Anthony's eye with a small smile. They had been performing together regularly since the charity concert. Their chamber music series at the school had become so popular that they had to move it to larger venues. They had even recorded an album of piano duets, which was selling well and attracting attention from major classical music labels. But more important than the professional success was the change in Anthony himself. He no longer felt the need to prove he was the best in every room. He had found something more satisfying, genuine connection through music, both with other musicians and with audiences. Let's start with Lee, Anthony said, nodding to his former star pupil, now in his final year at the school. He's been working on Chopin's Fourth Ballad. Lee moved to the piano and began to play. He was as technically brilliant as ever, but there was a new depth to his performance, an emotional quality that Anthony recognized as similar to May's influence. When Lee finished, Anthony looked at May. What did you hear? Beautiful playing, she said thoughtfully. But I wonder, Lee, what story are you telling with this piece? What does it mean to you personally? Lee looked surprised by the question. I've been thinking about change, how things can seem one way and then suddenly shift to something else, like the middle section of the piece. Yes, May nodded. I heard that transition. Show us again, please. As Lee demonstrated, Anthony watched the other students leaning forward, engaged and curious. This was the kind of teaching he had come to value, not showing off his own knowledge, but drawing out the students' understanding of the music. After the master class, Anthony and May walked through the park across from the school. It was autumn, and the trees were bright with red and gold leaves. They had fallen into the habit of these walks, discussing students' music and life. Lee has improved so much, May said, not just technically. He reminds me of myself at that age, Anthony admitted. Skilled, but missing something. You didn't miss anything, May corrected gently. You just hadn't found it yet. They stopped by the small lake in the center of the park, watching ducks glide across the water. I had a call from Carnegie Hall yesterday, Anthony said, trying to sound casual. They want us to perform there in the spring. May's eyes widened. Carnegie Hall? That's wonderful. There's more, Anthony continued. They're doing a special series on cultural exchange in music. They want us to perform my piece. Your piece? May looked confused. You've been composing? Anthony nodded, feeling suddenly shy. I've been working on something. A suite for 2 pianos inspired by our friendship. It combines Western classical structures with elements of Chinese traditional music. At least it tries to. May's expression softened. You've never mentioned composing before. I didn't tell anyone, Anthony confessed. I haven't written music since I was in college. Back then my teacher said my compositions were technically correct, but lacked emotion. After that I focused only on performing. What changed? May asked, though her eyes suggested she already knew. You did, Anthony said simply. You showed me that technical skill is just the beginning. Real music comes from somewhere deeper. May was quiet for a moment. Will you play it for me? Your composition? It's not finished yet. Anthony hesitated. And I would want you to contribute to it. Maybe write the final movement. A true collaboration. I would be honored, May said. Then she laughed softly. Do you remember when we first met? You challenged me to a piano duel. Anthony groaned. Please don't remind me. I was so arrogant. Not arrogant, May corrected. Just lost, maybe. Looking for approval in the wrong places. They continued their walk, making plans for their Carnegie Hall program, and discussing how to approach the composition together. As they circled back toward the school, May suddenly stopped. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. Lily is coming to visit next week. Your daughter? That's great, Anthony said, having met her several times since the concert. How are her studies going? Very well. She's in her final year of medical school now. May's voice filled with pride. She's been invited to present her research on childhood blood disorders at a conference and… May hesitated. She's bringing someone with her. A young man she's been seeing. That's wonderful, Anthony said, noting the mix of happiness and wistfulness in May's expression. You'll have to bring them to dinner at my place. I'll cook. You cook? May raised an eyebrow skeptically. I've been taking classes, Anthony admitted. There's more to life than piano, right? May laughed. This from the man who once told a student that practicing less than 5 hours a day was a waste of talent? They had reached the school. Through the windows they could see students practicing in various rooms, the silent movement of their hands visible from outside. I was thinking, May said as they paused at the entrance, about starting a free music program for children from low-income families. Not to train them as professional musicians necessarily, but to give them the gift of music in their lives. That sounds perfect, Anthony said. We could use some of the proceeds from our album, and we could teach together, May added. Share what we've learned. Anthony liked the idea of teaching alongside May, showing children not just how to play notes, but how to find joy in music. How different from the teacher he had been just a year ago. Focused on perfection and competition rather than connection and growth, they entered the school and headed toward the practice rooms they had reserved for their afternoon rehearsal. As they passed the main office, Rita called out to them, There you two are. I've been looking everywhere. The dean wants to see you both. They found the dean in his office, grinning broadly as he waved them in. I've just had the most exciting call, he announced. The International Piano Festival in Vienna is doing a special feature on musical partnerships. They want you two as the headliners. Vienna? Anthony and May exchanged surprised looks. All expenses paid, of course. 2 weeks in Vienna performing and teaching master classes. The dean leaned forward. This is huge for the school. Excellent publicity. When would this be? May asked. Next summer. You'll need to prepare at least 3 full programs of music. After they left the dean's office, Anthony and May sat at their pianos in the practice room absorbing the news. Vienna, May said softly. I performed there once long ago. Are you happy about going back? Anthony asked. She thought for a moment. Yes, but not for the reasons I would have been happy before. Not for the prestige or the acclaim. But to share music in such a beautiful place with you as my partner, that brings me joy. Anthony understood exactly what she meant. A year ago, he would have seen Vienna as a chance to prove himself, to compete with the world's best. Now he saw it as an opportunity to connect, to communicate, to create something beautiful with his friend. Shall we practice? He asked, placing his hands on the keys. May nodded, and they began to play. No longer 2 pianists competing for attention, but 2 artists creating something greater together than either could achieve alone. As the music filled the room, Anthony reflected on how far he had come from that first meeting with the quiet cleaning woman he had so foolishly challenged. He had lost a duel but gained a friend, a partner, and a better version of himself. Some defeats, he now understood, were the greatest victories of all.